Well, welcome everyone to the Places Matter conference. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Terre Duffy. I've been working in the creative sector and local authorities for over 20 years, and I was utterly joyous when I was asked to do a piece of research on both Tír Sáile, which is art in the landscape in North Mayo, and Lough Sculpture Park in Offaly. The project itself was funded by the Arts Council's Invitation to Collaboration scheme and led by Sally O'Leary, who we have with us today. Hi, Sally, who's the Arts Officer with Offaly County Council, led by Anne-Marie McGing and Aoife O'Toole, who's not with us today, but we have Anne-Marie McGing with us today, the Arts Officer with Mayo County Council, and Noel Kelly, the Director of Visual Artists Ireland. And they're in the room with us today, and we'll be hearing from them a little bit later. Places matter. I mean, we became acutely aware of that during COVID, you know, and our special places in nature took on a significance that, you know, finding special places in nature was so important. The local authorities in Ireland, each different county, are charged with managing our places, not just our special places like Tír Sáile and Lough, but our roads, our infrastructure. And I'm delighted to have Anne-Marie Delaney with us today, who is the Chief Executive of Offaly County Council, who's been a champion and ambassador for the creative sector in Offaly. And I'm delighted that she's been able to join us today and to talk about special collaborations with local authorities. Anne-Marie, delighted to have you with us. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Terry, and thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. I hope that you will all enjoy this session on art in the rural landscape, and I think it'll be very lively and informative. I'm delighted to be here for the third Places Matter conference and to introduce this particular session, which will provide an insight into an inter-county collaborative project between Offaly and Mayo County Councils regarding our sculpture parks, but also looking at how art in the rural landscape can enhance the tourism, arts, heritage offering in our counties and enhance the places in which we live. So I suppose, how can we as a local authority collaborate creatively and maximise our creative resources to improve and better plan our places in our communities? Well, I suppose, first of all, strategic planning within the local authority is essential to encourage cross-directorate departmental collaboration, first of all, and to maximise the resources available, and to maximise the impact of a project for stakeholders and for communities. From my own perspective, Offaly County Council's development plan presents an opportunity to shape the future growth of Offaly, to plan for and support the sustainable long-term development of the county. And I suppose the policy aim in our plan is to strengthen our strategic advantage and our strategic advantages as a county, to ensure that we utilise the strengths of our citizens, our communities, the built-in natural heritage, the infrastructure and tourism potential of the county to their full potential. I suppose secondly, engagement with stakeholders is critical to success. And thirdly, maximising the funding streams for researching, designing, planning and delivering projects, whether that be funding from our Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts, the Arts Council, Creative Ireland, or other funding streams such as the Creative Places, the Rural Regeneration Development Fund, or the Local Live Performance Fund, which has been activated in the recent past, to name just a few. I suppose to try and maximise all available funding streams in conjunction with the relevant partners for delivery of successful projects. With regard to Offaly specifically, I suppose really the cessation of peat harvesting and the decarbonisation agenda, the implementation of the Just Transition process, that's given us a unique opportunity to fully embrace this approach, both internally, cross-departmentally, and with our external partners. The Lough Sculpture Park project is one such initiative. The parkland is owned by Boora with significant tourism and community interest and benefit. Boora and Offaly County Council signed a memorandum of agreement a number of years ago, which is in place to 2025 for the maintenance and management of the park. And the park itself was commissioned in 2002. It continues to attract significant visitor numbers, with circa 100,000 visitors per annum to the park, and it's been listed in the Guardian list of top sculpture parks in Europe. Having regard to that changing landscape that we find ourselves in the context of just transition, Offaly County Council, in collaboration with Mayo County Council, received Arts Council funding to commission research on a report entitled Art in the Landscape, commissioned by Terre Duffy in 2020, which reinforced the importance of the sculpture parks in the context of the wider parklands, but also as a very significant and unique tourism and heritage product in its own right, and is worthy of further investment and more strategic management. And I want to acknowledge the partners in that project, Visual Artists Ireland, and Noel is project manager here this morning with us, the county arts officers for both counties, Sally O'Leary and Anne-Marie McGing here this morning, and as Terry mentioned, Eva O'Toole, the public art coordinator in Mayo, and Terry herself for their work on this project. And it is the subject of a dialogue between the partner organisations for the Art in the Landscape project that will follow this introduction. I'm very much looking forward to hearing that teased out further. I suppose another pillar that's underpinning the development of the arts in Offaly is the preparation of the arts infrastructure strategy. And I think that's very relevant to the discussion today as well. Offaly County Council are examining how we creatively collaborate for a better future for people and places. With the development of the arts infrastructure strategy itself will come a collaborative approach to planning how arts infrastructure in the county can work together for the benefit of the people of the county, and to ensure that that network of arts infrastructural organisations in the county are working together rather than in competition with one another. This piece of work will ensure that the arts infrastructure in the county is developed in a collaborative manner, resulting in a cohesive, complementary and a self-sustaining network. That's the objective. It's coming at a very opportune time for us here in Offaly, not least of all post-COVID, when we need to review the working models for future planning, operation and sustainment of the arts, particularly as the arts have been so evidently beneficial in the context of community and individual well-being. It's coming at an opportune time for us also because Offaly County Council have a number of arts infrastructural projects in the pipeline at the moment. We currently have an arts centre, Esker Arts, under construction in Tullamore, having purchased a vacant property in the town. We have a new library development with performance space for the arts, which is at design stage in Edenderry, again having purchased a disused building in the town centre. And we have a creative court project in an unused courthouse in Boora, providing studios and community spaces and enhancing and supporting the significant artistic base in that town. And all of these projects across our three main towns have come about through community demand, community engagement and stakeholder engagement. And all of those projects have harnessed various funding streams in their delivery. So I suppose to further support this work, Offaly County Council, in partnership with Creative Lives, were awarded the highly significant Creative Places funding for Edenderry. And this links into the Edenderry project. The funding is for a 3-year programme that will provide a foundation for future development of the people and place of Edenderry. And this project will align with the development of the planned library art space. The building, it'll be about, and that's the library art space that I've just mentioned, it'll be about building the audiences there and the public engagement prior to the opening of that new and much needed cultural space. So it allows us to plan for the development of that space. To return to the sculpture park and the main topic for this morning, Lough and Offaly, along with Tír Sáile Sculpture Trail in Mayo, forms part of the Art in the Landscape report, commissioned through funding made available through the Arts Council, the Arts Council's Invitation to Collaboration Fund, and the purpose to examine different operational models, funding mechanisms and opportunities, and to plan for a sustainable future for the parkland and the sculpture trail. So Lough Sculpture Park is a hugely significant asset to the county of Offaly. It was a very special place in the hearts of everyone in the county. And as part of the Lough Discovery Park, it's crucially important in terms of its economic, social and cultural role here in Offaly. And therefore the council are committed to finding ways through partnership and collaboration to retain and add value to the sculpture park for the local community, for visitors, whether they're local, regional, national or international visitors alike. And this will all be the subject under discussion by the panel this morning. So that gives a flavour, I suppose, of some of the discussion topics for this morning, a flavour of what's possible when necessity demands innovative approaches. So really, I suppose, planning strategically is key. Stakeholder engagement and funding partners are essential, and community engagement critical. So really, I'm hoping that you all enjoy the following discussion, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to hand you back now to Terry to introduce the panel speakers. Thanks very much, Terry.
Thanks, Anna Marie, and we wish Offaly every success with its capital programme over the coming years. Local authorities are such an important advocate and delivery mechanism, not just for our places in general, as I talked about in terms of general infrastructure, but particularly in terms of our arts infrastructure and our creative places. I remember 30 years ago, you know, listening to stories about North Mayo and, you know, the discovery of the Cage of Fields and how special that place was, and the coming together. Anna Marie, you talked about community participation. Anna Marie, I'd like to go to you first just to give some background and context to the rationale for the development of Tír Sáile and the story over the last 30 years. But just before you begin, I'd just like to say to those who are watching in the audience, please feel free now to start popping questions into the chat function. And when we come to closer to the end of the presentation, we'll be able to look at some of those questions. Anna Marie, over to you just to give some context about the story of Tír Sáile. You're on mute there, Anna Marie. No problem.
Sorry. Tír Sáile is a series of site-specific sculptures that are located in a range of rural environments and landscapes along the North Mayo coastline. And I suppose the trail itself was developed at a time of great kind of, I suppose, development and growth in the art sector in the county. But that being said, it was ahead of its time, and it still is, I suppose, in terms of ambition and scale, one of the largest projects, public art trails in the country. There's about 130 kilometres from beginning to end, so it stretches right the way from Ballina to Blacksod. Originally, there were 12 sites, with a further 3 sites being added a little bit later. One of those was an exhibition site. So there's, I suppose, locations with sculpture included. There were 14 sculptural installations. Today, there's about 11 that remain. 8 of those are in very good condition. 3 require some maintenance now, and 3 have been decommissioned. So that's just to kind of, I suppose, give it a bit of current context.
Yeah, Anna Marie spoke about community. Tír Sáile is very special in that regard in terms of how it was commissioned originally and the engagement with community.
Absolutely. So Tír Sáile came out of the year-long programme that celebrated the discovery of the Cage of Fields, Neolithic site in the north of the county that kind of marked 50 centuries of civilization, of settlement on the Mayo landscape. And the Cage of Fields site was discovered by a local archaeologist, Dr. Seamus Caulfield, and it led to the development of a visitor centre on the site and a year-long celebration, which included Tír Sáile. The actual, I suppose, project itself was proposed initially by Marion O'Donnell as a symposium that would respond to that discovery. But over time and conversations, it evolved and moved into the space of a site-specific sculpture, which was managed by Jalvorach 5000 Choranthas, a company set up specifically to deliver the project, but which included not only local development organisations like Mayo County Council, but also a lot of community organisations and groups who really took the project to their heart, I suppose. And the initial open call offered 26 sites to artists to respond to and make work to. The vast majority of those were in private ownership at the time. So I suppose that notion of the mehel was really strong and underpinned the project in North Mayo. And for those who aren't aware, the Mehel is this bringing together of people for a common goal and common cause. And Tír Sáile, right from the beginning, from project development right the way through to the collaboration with the artists who were selected, to the offer of sites, to the hosting of artists. It was really a central core in the project. And I would say it had a huge, left a very significant impression with the local people, but it also made Céide Fields and that discovery a much more tangible kind of notion or idea for local people, and deepened the connection there, and very, like even today, there's a palpable pride towards, and very much a really good, people wanting to keep Tír Sáile safe and look after it for the future. The primary aim of the project at the time was to celebrate the past, to, I suppose, just think about the present, and then to embrace the future. And it also looked, I suppose, at the ideas of human settlement and agriculture and folklore, mythology, all very unique and specific to this parcel of land in the north of the county, and the people who live there. And I think the work that came out of the project is very much reflective and rooted in that space as well. There was also, I suppose, a strong focus on organic local materials, and the artists responding to, not to I suppose, new developments, but to developments and settlements that had been there for 5,000 years, which I suppose brought this place into being. Naturally, some of the materials were, I suppose, the idea was that they would degrade and would kind of seep back into the local landscape, and that what would remain might only be a blemish or a mark or a memory in somebody's, kind of the folklore of that region. And the initial brief, I think, in the introduction to Alan Lonergan's book, Peter Hines talks about the initial brief and the idea that barring routine maintenance, the pieces will be free to voyage through the next 5 millennia independently, which is a lovely notion in itself, and that would, I suppose, be there for the Mayo 10,000 celebrations, that mark on the landscape would still remain. And just there's a poem by a local writer, Pádraig Ó Láimhín, who talks about the impact, I suppose, of Tír Sáile, and it kind of really succinctly sums up how people felt about it locally. It's called The Sculpture, so I'll just read it to you quickly. They came, took our hearts in their hands, and with earth, stone and wood gave shape to our thoughts, our pride and woes, our legends and heroes, on mountain and headland, on sea cliff and crag. They went, left their love in our hearts, their concern as a gift. They carved their verses with art and skill on our native shores, and on our minds they left the echo of their souls. So I think that's it's just a lovely sentiment. It really sums up, I think, the feeling that existed in North Mayo in 1993.
Yeah, and in some ways there's a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences between the sculpture trail in North Mayo and Lough Boora sculpture parklands. Anne-Marie, the image behind you there, I mean, it's a really strong piece of work, but the context of that, I mean, it's an incredible place. And Anne-Marie, you mentioned at the beginning in your presentation around how we needed these places during COVID, how special places in nature did something to our wellness, did something for our souls. And I think, moving to you, Sally, Lough Boora Sculpture Parklands has that also, although the landscape is very different. It has the ability to connect with us at some level. Do you want to tell us the story of the incredible Lough Boora Parklands, Sally?
Yes, thanks, Terry. Yeah, so Lough Boora Sculpture Park is located actually within Lough Boora Discovery Park, and there's up to 24 sculptures that form a trail actually within the parkland. And it was originally known as Sculpture in Parkland. So in a similar way to Tír Sáile, it came from a sculpture symposium in 2002, known as the Lough Boora International Sculpture Symposium. And this was curated by artist Kevin O'Dwyer. And the curatorial theme was that as a direct response to the environment, landscape, and particularly the industrial heritage of the parkland and the peatland. So in the same way that Tír Sáile was, the symposium was residency-based. 7 artists were invited to spend 3 weeks in the locality and working within the parkland to create works on site. And just to give a little bit of context of what was happening at the time, Board na Móna had at this time begun to transform the cutaway peat bog in Lough Boora from sort of the commercial site to a community utility. So a place where local people as well as visitors could actually go and enjoy the landscape, which is so very, very special and particular to Offaly. And it was envisaged that this would be a multi-use options that would enhance economic and social life for local communities, but also to bring in visitors. And of course, the development of the sculpture park actually fit in with that ambition very well, but it also added an aesthetic value to that. So the artists who came to the symposium had the most extraordinary experience, and a very, very unique one, because they came and they had this blank canvas upon which they could create and install works of great scale and impact. And if we think back to that time, which is sort of nearly over 20 years ago now, the landscape there was this enormous fields of dark, black, brown land. So any sculpture going on there was very impactful. And the artists were able to immerse themselves into the life and community of Offaly for this 3-week period. And they were therefore also very integrated and immersed within the rich life and heritage of the people of Offaly and their own intimate relationship with the land and the bog. So working with Board na Móna, they were also given the opportunity to explore and utilise the materials and equipment, etc., that was part of the workings of the Board na Móna's cutaway extraction. So they were able to sort of explore and find things like old railway sleepers and tracks and excavated oak bogs, wood, etc. And I will quote a little bit from a publication by Tim Collins and Reiko Goto-Collins, who recently were commissioned by Offaly County Council to do an artist's deep map of the Lough Boora Sculpture Park. And they were talking to local communities, but also to some of the artists. And having a conversation with Michael Bulfin, who claimed that as artists, they were supported by a range of engineering expertise, rigging and transport, industrial scale tools, and significant technologies that allowed them to work at the scale that the site demanded. And I think that's really telling, because it just shows you how impressed the artists were with this site itself, and that this site demanded extraordinary responses. So the fact that the residency was on Board na Móna land meant that the artists were supported by the expertise, skills and knowledge of the Board na Móna engineers and staff. And therefore we had a perfect collaboration really here between the artists, the staff of Board na Móna, and support from funding from Offaly County Council and the Arts Council. And following on from the original symposium in 2002, the company, which were called Lough Boora Parkland Group, they worked and continued to work to develop Lough Boora Discovery Park as we know it today. And the group, in a similar way to, as Anna-Marie was saying there, was that they're made up with the Board and Mona, but also with local development groups and local community. And while the symposium model wasn't repeated on the same scale, but between 2002 and 2011, virtually on an annual basis, works were commissioned and installed. And a similar scenario occurred where the artists would go and work and be on site and have all of the opportunities that entailed. And so now we have 24 sculptures in various degrees of repair, because in a similar way, as Anne-Marie was saying, some of these works were meant to start to disintegrate. So some of the legacy of this work is impressive. Lough Sculpture Park has won many awards and received critical acclaim nationally and internationally. And the curation of the project by Kevin O'Dwyer, with his own reputation and experience and his connections in the field of land and environmental art, has drawn a lot of interests from the art world and beyond. There's a series of pride actually from the workers within Board and Mona and the local community, particularly around the artworks on site. And that pride has meant that, you know, they have taken care and they feel ownership of those pieces. And to a certain extent, the workers there on the site are almost the custodians of the works, that they're keeping them safe. Artists and local communities also have a huge pride in Lough Sculpture Park, and they're very, very keen to continue to be involved in discussions about where we go and how we progress this. So while there weren't any new site-specific commissions after 2011, there was still a lot happening. There were engagements between Board and Mona and Offaly County Council, and there were temporal works happening, and there was education programmes. So now we're in a position where we are, with Board and Mona, exploring ways in which we can look at suitable and sustainable ways to operate and govern the parklands. And this has been really helped for us by a lot of research that has taken place recently, including your own, Terre. So, you know, we're in that position at the moment.
And can I just ask, and I'll bring you in, Anne-Marie, here. So the creation of this amazing asset, you know, through the different but similar processes, for Anne-Marie, almost 30 years on, and for Boora and Tír Sáile, 22 years and a little bit more on, you have this incredible collection. You're the custodians of it locally, but it has significance nationally and internationally. So for you, both in your local authorities, what is the significance of it? Economically, spiritually, artistically, from a place matters and pride and community point of view. Anne-Marie, I'll go to you first. What is the significance of this now, 30 years on?
I think, like, if you were to think about it, one of its original aims was to celebrate this place and this time and mark that. That it did that really successfully, and it continues to do that. Like, I'm always, I suppose, kind of, when you look at the reviews, I was doing some research for this, looking at the reviews and the response to it by people visiting. You do have to make a commitment to come and see Tír Sáile. You know, it demands that, I suppose, of its audience. But artistically, like, it was really ahead of its time in terms of the scale and the impact, and that encouraging people out to explore a part of the county that, you know, you have to make a conscious decision. You want to get to North Mayo and you want to spend time there. I think there's huge potential from where it's located along the Wild Atlantic Way. That's quite, I suppose, in terms of a strategic positioning, that wasn't intended at the time, but that's a real bonus, I think, for
And can I ask you, in relation to that, and Anne-Marie, you spoke about the necessity to involve the stakeholders. And originally the stakeholders were the community, Mayo County Council. But what new stakeholders now are emerging 30 years on with this?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of new organisations that have come into being, the Ballinglen Arts Foundation in North Mayo, Áras Innisglúra, and in 2017 we did a smaller scale residency with Áras Innisglúra and commissioned 3 temporary works with Garth Kennedy, Selma Michaela, Noah Rose, and with Joanna Hopkins, which I suppose showcased another way that you can respond to landscape that doesn't bring maybe the challenges of long-term maintenance programs. And but what does this say about us, or who is this for as well, is a really important consideration. I think we tend to think of the visitor, but it's equally, if not more important, for the citizens of the county, the citizens of North Mayo, the citizens of Belderrick. And when we talk about places matter and places, making places and place making, you can't do that without people either. Yeah. So the community voice and the community involvement in whatever that stakeholder engagement piece looks like is, I think, of paramount importance, that their voices is heard and in a meaningful way as well.
Sally, I'll come to you now. I mean, your custodians, I mean, I think as part of my research, I kind of suggested that if you were to commission something like Lough Boora today, you know, you would need €1 million in your back pocket to start off, and that's just in terms of the work. So you're custodians of a very important collection for locally, nationally and internationally. What is the significance, and again I'll ask the question, economically, socially, spiritually, practically, of being custodians of such an important body of work? Yeah,
I suppose one of the things you know, from that question is that the model that made this happen in the first place could be very difficult to repeat, and maybe is not the right model, but it does demonstrate the power of collaboration. And, you know, to a certain extent, whatever iteration that comes out of, that collaboration is really important. Because I don't think it would have happened if not for the enthusiasm and the drive of the artists, the community, Board and owner, Offaly County Council and the Arts Council. You know, we wouldn't be here today having this conversation. So those collaborations are really important, and if you can try to you know, tap into that type of collaboration, whatever that form is, it's a really important thing to try and do. In terms of significance, I suppose, you know, the sculptures themselves hold a huge legacy, and because they encapsulate the story of the peat bog, and that is the story of a people and a place. So because they are so interwoven with the history and heritage of place, they themselves as pieces are highly significant. Of course, the whole process has meant that we on our doorsteps have a collection which is hugely significant and is of national and international significance. But again, the questions arise about maintenance and how we keep them safe. And these are the questions that, you know, that have to be discussed and find answers for. In terms of, you know, from Board and owner's point of view, they have a huge asset and legacy as well. And, you know, it's having the conversations that everybody realizes the asset. From a community and economic perspective, you know, they developed such a strong relationship between the local community and the sculpture park. I mean, people love Lough Boora Sculpture Park. You know, there's such a strong attraction to the place, and people visit it all the time. And that's just local people. You know, obviously, it also is a huge tourism attraction. And as Anna-Marie just mentioned earlier on, you know, pre-pandemic, the numbers were 100,000 a year, which is, no small number for people to be coming and being able to go and visit the sculptures and walk around them.
Sally, I think, Noel, I'd like to bring you in here. So the model, the commissioning model for both Tír Sáile and Lough Boora was the sculpture symposium, which was, very common 20 and 30 years ago. And I see Eileen McDonough here in the panel. Welcome, Eileen, who is, a significant part of both. And that was a large-scale commissioning, was a genre of its time. I suppose in terms, what is the thinking around that now, both the symposium model and large-scale commissioning? Because it's wonderful, but it also raises a lot of challenges in terms of ongoing management and maintenance, and we'll come to that later.
Yeah, I think that you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the symposium model. It has been interesting seeing many suggestions coming up along in recent times that, the symposium model needs to be brought back. We need to sort of be supporting these, artist-led for the most part, initiatives. And there is a tendency to look at what has happened in the past, trying to replicate it. And what we've been trying to do is actually also look at, is there a new format? Like, fundamentally, the symposium model is the making model. That is at its core, and it offers a very unique coming together moment. How do we develop on that? I think the unfortunate thing is that there are very few new voices coming along, kind of like embracing it. It is not being embraced as a model by the new generation of commissioners or curators, etc. So once again, it's falling back to the artists, which both of these projects were artist initiated, but the support mechanisms are not there. And I mean, we don't always want to bring things back into funding structures, but there are very few structures that can actually support, even though we have seen it at a local level. Like not so long ago, I was quite literally driving through Clonus and happened upon a sculpture symposium in progress, and nobody knew about it except the locals, etc. So whilst it may be happening at the smaller level, at the national level, I think we really need to address it and sort of like bring back the level of knowledge and experience, and actually also the level of wonder and engagement it brings, because we talk a lot about stakeholder value now, and we identify our stakeholders not only as the local audience, our stakeholders are tourism, our stakeholders are economic, and so on. And bringing them into this model and saying, well, actually, you know what, this symposium model, let's think of it in a different way. Let's talk to you about it like a festivalization of sculpture in a particular context. So we can actually use their language to sort of like bring them on the journey. And perhaps that's the way that we can actually start to encourage, more engagement and more opportunity for the level of funding that is required for it.
As part of this research, I looked at other sculpture parks, art in the landscape, nationally and internationally. In 2010, in my role in Donegal, I went to northern Norway to look at a sculpture trail not unlike Tír Sáile in that it spanned the full, coastline of Norway. And I called them and said, how's it going for you guys 30 years on? And they're also struggling with some of the same issues that we're having here, the thorny issue of ongoing management and maintenance, where to achieve a project of scale and ambition, like both local authorities did, was remarkable. I mean, I looked at it from a distance and thought, wow, what they're doing in Offaly and what they're doing in Mayo is remarkable, that courage, that ambition. But that courage and ambition then raises the issue around the long-term management and maintenance. And what do? You create this amazing work, people come to see it, but you need to interpret it, you need to look after it, you need to... So in both counties, again, I go to you, Anne-Marie, in North Mayo, how's it going for ye in terms of the thorny subject of management and maintenance?
Yeah, I suppose Tír Sáile, when it was developed, came out of I suppose that partnership approach. So a consortium of people came together, and I think the thing that was foremost in their minds was the delivery of the trail. And not, as you said, it's not uncommon, and I suppose it's still a challenge even in terms of public art commissioning in general in the country. This notion of management and maintenance beyond the initial flush of the project. So it's kind of ad hoc at the moment. Mayo County Council, I suppose Tír Sáile is sometimes seen as a Mayo County Council project. It isn't, essentially because it came from that partnership space, but we have done some small level of maintenance, worked with the local rural social scheme during that 2017 project to kind of I suppose it's just to make work presentable. If you're directing people there as well, there's a responsibility and a consideration around what the offering is, and looking. So the ownership is, I think, the biggest question for Tír Sáile, the ownership and the management piece. And that ties in then to our strategic planning and policies. The Fáilte Ireland are looking at developing a destination experience development plan for the northwest area of the county. So we're hoping that through some of these processes we will be able to I suppose deal with that thorny issue of management and ownership, and realise that there's, I suppose, compromise and consolidation that needs to happen for something long-term that's sustainable to be put in place. And that's done formally. I think a lot of it, happened over the years, but it's going back to that question of if you were to deliver Tír Sáile now, the parameters are very different, and it's a very different, I suppose, world in which you would be delivering a project like that.
And you would hope that the fear of the long-term responsibility wouldn't not allow commissioners to take that bold and brave step, which both Offaly and Mayo did. Sally, I'll ask you the same question. I mean, you've got 22 works, beautiful works that are easily accessible, but made of local materials, so are exposed to the elements and to decay. How are you getting on with this whole thorny issue of management and maintenance, and where to next?
Yeah, again, we would have similar issues in terms of, the maintenance. I mean, the relationship and the partnership with Boora and Tír has continued, and we have our memorandum of agreement. But maintenance is a difficult situation because it's, continuous and it requires funding sources. So there would have been works that would naturally degrade, and there are works that actually do need to be maintained and need work doing to them. It's an ongoing discussion, it's an ongoing conversation, and there has been, a lot of change, particularly in Offaly, and particularly for Boora and Tír through the whole just transition. So it is a conversation which we are keen to keep going, and they are keen to be involved in. So, and I think through our own arts infrastructure strategy, because the sculpture park is so important to Offaly County Council as a significant cultural asset, the fact it's within the going to be very much part of the arts infrastructure strategy will also be a driver in terms of how we move forward and how we develop the whole idea around operations and governance and future management.
And I just see there a note from Eileen McDonough. Symposium were run on a shoestring. It was an opportunity for sculptors to work on large scale and to learn the language of scale. I think that was an important from the artists. I mean, they're a significant stakeholder in place. But also a very rich learning ground, sculpture symposia, and both projects were a very rich learning ground for our sculptural artists, large scale, and to learn the language of scale, all artist led and not easy to get over the line. Yeah, you were also part of the bravery and courage. The artists who were involved in those symposium were a chance to work in public place and to let locals see how it's done, and to bring art out of the gallery and to demystify. I think, I mean, there were a wonderful opportunity for the public to connect with artists in a real and meaningful way, and then to see the legacy of the work on the ground. In terms then of the conference theme, Places Matter, the role of the artist in outside, I suppose, of both projects, the role of the artist in our places. Anne-Marie, as an arts officer, what do you see as the role of the artist in place making?
Yeah, I guess from the perspective of the arts service, without artists, there's no service in a sense. Yeah. So they are crucial, and if you think of Tír Sáile, and I had mentioned there that connection and that tangible connection and understanding of the significance of Céide Fields and that discovery in the north of the county, I think the artists' work through the symposium and that engagement with the community led to a much deeper understanding of the significance of that find for the community, but also for the artists as well, and enriched their own practices. And that, when we spoke yesterday about the Tume, creative Tume placemaking project that's happening, and the notion of what's left thereafter once the symposium finishes, once the project finishes. What you have, that capacity, that experience, that depth, that research piece, that it's difficult to decide where, or to know where any of that will eventually impact. But I think in terms of giving an alternative voice or a different voice, the artists can provide that space, a safe space in which to explore ideas that are sometimes maybe a little bit different to the norm.
Sally, would you like to make a comment on that, or even Noel, to bring you in here in relation to, I suppose, the role of the artists as cultural interpreters? In this case, it was cultural interpreters of the landscape. North Mayo was 5,000 years. In Mayo, it was, the significance of the bog landscape, the role of the artist in our placemaking.
Without sort of coming across as kind of a contrarian, I always worry when we try and instrumentalize the artist in a way that, over the years we have seen artists given many, many different roles. I think if we look at the work that they undertake, what we are seeing is that they are actually a reflection of place and time in terms of imagination, in terms of our dreams, as well as in terms of the practical side of our existence. And then the role of the work, whilst it actually has that as an integral part of it, it actually also becomes part of the cultural heritage of an area and even of a nation. And I think that that's a very important transition that we need to investigate, and we will probably investigate in our own conference a little bit on it. And that is the role of the artist, the curator, the place in time, but then how the work transitions from being solely an artwork reflecting place and time, moving it into being part of the cultural heritage. And how do we preserve this cultural heritage? When the artwork becomes a heritage object. Mm-hmm. And I think we have failed in that, quite quite significantly over the years of we depend on folk memory. We depend on, the memory and that beautiful poem, talking about the Mayo experience. I want to steal it and quote it in many places. But there is the historical and there is, the archival quality that needs to be considered as well. So that in 100-year time, because when we talk about longevity and talking to artists about longevity, yes, we can talk about materials or, we can talk about process and so on. But we also need to, what do we mean by longevity? We've seen commissions recently in Dublin where they're talking about longevity is a minimum of 100 years. So actually, what are we preserving for 100 years' time? Is it only the object? Are we going to preserve the experience of the artist? Are we preserving the context, etc.? So I think a lot of that is being built in. But going back to the role of the artist is bringing their imagination, the artist is bringing their vision and helping us to develop our own vision of the location. It is up to us to make sure that this vision has longevity and remains relevant.
And I suppose that's where the role of the local authority, comes in and has been very successful. I mean, plays such a significant part in our places. I go back to what I said at the beginning, our places, our footpaths, our roads, our infrastructure, but also has made such a significant investment into the creative place making of our places. And I think now is being recognised for the achievements and the deliverables over the last number of years. We're coming to the end of our session now. I just want to thank, especially want to thank Offaly and Mayo for a wonderfully rich opportunity for me to take part in research in such amazing projects as in Tír Sáile and Lough. Thank you, Anna Marie, for coming in and giving it an input. Thank you to Noel Kelly from Visual Artists Ireland. Thank you to Anne Marie McGinn, the Arts Officer from Mayo, and Sally O'Leary, the Arts Officer from Offaly County Council. I wish the rest of the conference, good chats and deep thinking, and I wish both projects every good success, because place matters, and we've learned that so much during COVID. So enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you for coming, and to those who are watching it into the future, thank you as well. Good afternoon or good morning.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you.